In a world where hustle culture collides with wellness warnings and workplace demands keep evolving, how do we stay sharp without burning out? How do we navigate the endless stream of wellness trends while actually getting results? This is the Work and Wellness Podcast, and I'm your host, Angela Davies. Drawing from my own journey of wins, stumbles, and honest revelations, I'll be bringing you raw, unfiltered conversations with experts and inspiring guests who've been there, lived it, and found a better way. Together, we'll cut through the noise and workshop what it really means to be well in today's workplace. No more choosing between success and sanity. No more sacrificing health for achievement. Whether you're struggling with burnout, searching for purpose, or simply ready to work smarter, not harder, you're in the right place. This is real talk about real solutions for real people. Let's get into it. Hello friends, welcome to the show. This week is my birthday week. I am turning 39 this week, and so I thought I would do a little bit of a intro to myself and a background story around how I've gotten to doing this podcast and why it's so important to me and the topics are so important to me. We've done 12 episodes so far. You've heard me talk about a lot of different things when it comes to health and wellness and interview some great people already with so many more to come. I thought it would be good for those of you who don't know me to learn a little bit more about my story, and I think particularly coming up to birthday time, my last year in my 30s, it's a really good time just to get in and share a little bit more about my story. So let's take it back to the beginning. We'll start at the start, and I just want to start by saying that yes, I talk about some different adversities that I experienced in my life, but it's not about doom and gloom. It's really about how adversities really build strength and resilience in us. They test who we really are as people, and they can provide a really great springboard into us growing as people. And I always think the things that we've learned in life are the things that really enable us to help other people and spread really important messages in the world. So yes, I'm going to go into some of the challenges that I've had, but I look at them as truly springboards into bigger, better, brighter opportunities. So I grew up very overweight. My mum was a chef and my nan showed her love like most nans do by feeding us, and my nan lived with us. So she really raised us because my parents both ran their own businesses and were often away. So Nanny lived with us and raised us. She was my favorite person in the whole world. She lived till she's 98. What a legend. And she really showed us love with food. And so that led to me being a very overweight child. And I also grew up in a household that was very financially challenged, and it was a lot of ups and downs, and I saw and experienced a lot of challenging things when it came to money. And from a young age, I really understood what it meant to struggle, and I really saw my parents struggle a lot with money and finances in particular. And I think almost subconsciously, I made a bit of a promise to myself that I was always going to work really hard so I didn't have to worry about finances. And that's not to say my parents didn't work hard. They worked so hard. They worked every minute that I think they could. But it's just I wanted to make sure that I really understood finances and the value of money so that I didn't have to live like that. And I think that drive really pushed me forward, but for a long time, what that meant was that I really only focused on external success or what the world thought or thinks success is. And that upbringing really shaped me into a high performer. I obviously saw my parents work really hard. They encouraged me to, work hard and do all the things that I wanted to do. But it was really off my own bat that I had to do those things. And I feel like I drove a lot of that in my life. I remember taking my nan to a school interview for a better school than the one I was going to. And I didn't tell my parents and took Nanny with me because I just knew that I wanted to go to a better school than the one I was going to. So I feel like I drove a lot of that stuff in my life, and it was probably subconsciously off the back of not wanting to really struggle like my parents did. I feel like hard work really became part of my identity and who I was, and it was something that I was so proud of, that I was such this hard worker. And I feel like my identity became very deeply tied to my achievements, my work ethic, my ability to push through anything. If I was excelling in school or my career, I felt worthy. And if I wasn't, I felt like I was falling behind. And I remember the first time this really came to fore for me was when I started uni. I felt like, I knew how to work and get good grades at school, and I rested on my laurels a bit when I started uni, and I failed 3 of my subjects in my first semester. And I was studying economics, and I was just shocked. But what that did was lead me into a downward spiral of really poor self-worth, because if I wasn't achieving, then who was I? And I think through my whole school life, that's who I was. I was always the person who was, working hard to get the good grades. But I feel like that led me down a really good path, in the sense that it led me to be a high performer at work and really want to work hard and get good results and continue to get promotions and deliver results. But that also comes at a cost as well. And I think over time, that started to show. At the same time, I was still overweight. So I sort of took all of that overweightness into my early 20s. And I was working out, but not with really any purpose. And as everyone does at uni, you're drinking and eating, whatever you want to. And then I met my now husband, who is, I feel like at the time I met him, he was almost like an amateur athlete. He was doing adventure racing. He'd won ultra marathons. He'd run to and from work every day, which was like, 20 Ks each way. Definitely not what I was doing. And he certainly rubbed off on me for the better. So we did a lot of active stuff together. Liam was the guy who thought wearing a 20-kilo weight vest to do soft sand sprints was a great way to spend a Saturday morning. And so I was just along for the ride. I wanted to be healthy and get fit, and he taught me a lot about that. And still to this day, we love getting out and hiking and doing physical things, and we are training for an ultra marathon now. So I feel like it's sort of how we started and how we continue, and it's the way that really we solve the problems of the world. But over that time, I started learning more. Liam really taught me more about moving my body. I trained to become a Pilates instructor as well. So I really started to understand and intimately know the body, and learned a lot more about nutrition. And I lost 23 kilos in my sort of mid-20s. And very quickly, that identity had to shift as well. So I went from being sort of this chubby, high performer, I like to say I was a little bit funny, to someone who was really understanding nutrition and exercise. And I felt like I was dialed in on my well-being. I was exercising, running, high performing. I do F45 in the mornings towards my late 20s and early 30s, and go to work, have a full day at work, exercise more when I came home. And I thought that was well-being. I thought, I've got this nailed. I'm a Pilates instructor. I know what well-being is. I thought it was really dialed in. And I continued to move through my career. I was taking on more responsibility, moving into leadership roles, taking on bigger teams that are doing more interesting and large and broad, important work, particularly in the banking sector. So I moved into banking. I initially started my career actually in HR. So that was the start of my career, and then moved into leading a strategy and operations team in business banking. And then following on from that, frontline leadership role of business bankers in a region. And I felt like that was going well. You know, my career was going really well. I felt like I had my health dialed in. And then 2022 happened. And 2022 was really the year that changed everything for me. And I don't think anything really could have prepared me for the way that that year broke me as a person. At the start of the year, I was at a health retreat for my birthday in February, and as I was leaving that health retreat, I suffered a miscarriage about 3 days after my birthday. And it was quite traumatic. It was quite a traumatic miscarriage. And it was after Liam and I had been trying for quite some time. So it was certainly a really big blow. And sadly, Liam was away at the time. He rushed home, got the quickest flight he could, which was the next day. And we just kind of had to sit in that. And, you know, I didn't even know how to process it, to be honest. It was just a really big blow. But the funny thing was, I just went back to work the next Monday. So this happened at the end of the week, and I just went back to work to distract myself like nothing had happened. And then 2 weeks later, the Northern Rivers floods hit. And for those who don't know, those were the worst floods that Australia has ever seen. It was absolutely devastating to see the impact of these floods, and a huge number of our customers in the bank were impacted, and my team and our broader team were impacted. Our banking office was completely underwater, and our customers, our friends so many of them lost everything, their businesses, their homes. And so very quickly, my focus turned away from what had happened with the miscarriage, and I really wanted to focus on helping my team and our customers try and get back to some semblance of normal or of what they could. You know, people didn't even have ID or bank cards to get money out of the bank. There weren't even branches. We had to bring container branches in, like literally in a shipping container, so that people could do just their banking and get access to their money. And 4 weeks later, a second flood hit just after everyone had started cleaning up. So this was a pretty challenging and tumultuous time, and we were dealing with customers in really severe states of trauma, having lost so much. So that was a really tough time. And then a couple of months later, my husband Liam got diagnosed with, at the time, a life-threatening medical condition. And so these things all happened between February and April. And my response to all of it was to ignore it, to work harder, to focus on work. And if I did that, everything would be okay. Until it wasn't. And I'll never forget, I was in a client meeting with one of my bankers in a hot, sweaty industrial shed, and all of a sudden I felt the walls caving in around me, and I started to feel really faint, and I honestly thought I was going to just pass out there and then. So thankfully one of my bankers was with me, and I was able to excuse myself from that meeting and get in my car, and I just wanted to go home. I thought it must have been a flu or some sort of sickness, and I just wanted to get home and just sort of log back on from home and rest. But that day I didn't make it home. I ended up pulled over on the side of the road in my bank 4-wheel drive, shaking violently as trucks rushed past me, thinking I was having a heart attack. And I couldn't see, I couldn't breathe. My heart was pounding through my chest. And the only thing I knew to do was to call Liam, my husband, because he is the calmest person I know in a crisis. He is an ex-Navy clearance diver, and so he's really good under pressure. And he just encouraged me to roll back my seat and breathe. And that was a very serious panic attack and the first of many more to come. And I feel like what I learned over that time was that if you don't listen to the signs and symptoms in your body or in your mind or in your heart of what's going on, your body will start to scream louder and louder until you listen. And so, being the A-type personality I am, I did what any normal person would do. I signed up to study my master's in psychology intensively. And at the time, I was working 60 plus hours a week in banking. I was also running a small Pilates studio from my home and teaching about 15 or 20 Pilates classes a week. And so the banker in me started adding up the hours and the numbers, and I very quickly realized those numbers don't add up. And so I did what I never thought I would do and resigned from my corporate role in banking. Despite the fact that I felt like my whole identity was tied to my work and that it was the secure income that I had worked my whole life to build up so I didn't have to live in the way that I did when I was a kid, I knew that something had to give, and I felt like I really needed to focus my attention on studying because I knew I wasn't the only person who experienced this. I feel like there are a lot of other people who work in the corporate space or in any workplace who are high performing, possibly have high functioning anxiety. I certainly have high functioning anxiety from, when I look back, it's really easy to see that my overwork and overstriving was really high functioning anxiety at the time. And I felt like at the time, if I could share my story and the learnings that I was learning from my psychology study, plus my lived experience, and I could help someone change their career trajectory by focusing on their well-being, then it was worth a shot. And I feel so grateful for my husband Liam because he really backed me so strongly to go and focus and do my own thing, because he believed in me more than I even believed in myself that this was such an important path to go down. And that sort of has led me down this path of learning and teaching and growing and learning about myself. And I mentioned a miscarriage earlier, overstudying my time studying in psychology. Liam and I also made the decision to not have kids and to make a very purposeful decision not to have children. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't understand. It's something that is not the normal path for society, but it was really important to us to make a really proactive decision about what we were going to do moving forward. And so psychology really helped me rationalize that. There's a part in psychology that says a large part of the reason, aside from evolution and passing on your gene pool, but that people have kids is to leave some sort of legacy. And knowing that I could help people with their mental health and well-being felt like a really strong and sound legacy for me to leave. And it helped me come to terms with making that decision. We also have some really beautiful friends around us who have kids, and I feel like Liam in particular, but with a fun aunt and uncle always. So, that was another part of our journey and something I speak to people a lot about. It's a little bit of an aside, it's not necessarily related to health and well-being, but I do think a lot of women in corporate particularly struggle with either the idea of having children and whether it's going to halt their careers or not, or leaving having children to later because they prioritize their career. And I really feel passionate about, as an aside, having that as a really important conversation. I don't think either decision is right or wrong. It's just what's right or wrong for you. But it's certainly something that I feel passionate about talking about. And so if anyone is listening and does want to talk about that, I'm always happy and open in my DMs on Instagram to chat about that. But all of that really led me to today and where we are today, not just with the podcast, but also I run workshops and do keynotes in corporates around how to really proactively look after your well-being so that you don't end up like me, completely burnt out, having a panic attack on the side of the road, but really optimize your performance through your well-being. And something that I've learned is it's almost a fallacy to say that you have to work harder to get ahead. And what I learned is it works to a point. It worked for me up until 2022, and then I burnt out completely and suffered panic attacks, like I said. And so I feel like the hard work and the grind without looking after your well-being has an expiry date. And if I can help people with small practical tips that you can all implement in your day-to-day that can have a marked impact on your well-being, then I feel like I've really found my sweet spot. And I think because I come from the corporate world, I understand the constructs in which people are working in the corporate world. We can't always just say no to things. You know, we do have a job at the end of the day, and there are pressures, and sometimes we do need to work, you know, a little more. But it's really about finding those ways that we can take control of within our day to look after our well-being. And I guess my focus is helping people really lead exceptional lives while thriving in their career. And I truly believe that career success and strong well-being can coexist. And my story is the reason that I feel so passionate about helping people to achieve that with the tools and tips that I've learned, that I've applied myself to come out the other side of my burnout and feel like I'm really thriving now, but also from my study and my lived experience. Because I feel like if there's one thing I've learned, it's that success isn't just about what we achieve. It's about how we feel while we're achieving it. And if we get to the end of our careers and we have been successful and got the promotions and given our all, but we don't have our health to show for it at the end, then I feel like what's it all for? And I really do feel like it's a fallacy to say that you have to work at the expense of your health, because the research and the science does show that the more you look after your health and well-being, the better you're actually going to perform at work. So that's a little bit about my story. I feel like it was a whistle-stop tour of sort of my background and my story, but I feel like they're all little elements. And I guess there's so much more to it. We all have such deep and rich and long stories as human beings, but those are some of the little milestones and snippets that I feel have been really responsible for my journey to leading me here. And I started the podcast because I wanted to give the information that I share with corporates out in little snippets for people that are digestible. And I feel like if it even changes the way one person manages or looks after their well-being, then I feel like I've done my job. So thank you for listening. It is quite nice to do a little reflection on my birthday week, but I hope you have a great week and I'll see you next week. Thanks for joining me on Work and Wellness. If today's episode resonated with you, remember, someone in your network might need to hear this too. Share it with a colleague or friend who could use these insights. I'd love to keep the conversation going, so find us on Instagram at Mind Your Grit, where we share daily tips and continue these discussions. And if you found value in today's episode, please take time to rate and review the show. It makes such a huge difference and helps other people discover conversations they might really need. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Each week, we're building a community of people who believe that success and well-being go hand in hand. You can find the notes, resources, and links from today's episode at mindyourgrit.com. This is Work and Wellness with Angela Davies. Your work matters, your wellness matters, and this is where it all comes together. See you next week.